Good morning, everyone. Thanks for that introduction. Okay, so like was shared, my name is Jessica and I'm an MA student at Brock University. Today I'm sharing a portion of my thesis research titled Don Cherry's Final Rant, Illuminating Canadian Nationalism, Racial Xenophobia, and Toxic Masculinity through Critical Discourse Analysis. Brock University and the Niagara region, where I live, work, and study, is located on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people. This region is governed by the Truro Wampum Treaty, which was established between the Haudenosaunee people and the Dutch colonists in the early 17th century. As a settler, I realized that one of the most important teachings from the Truro is that neither settlers nor Indigenous peoples will attempt to steer the other's vessel. I think it is so important for me as a settler to focus on settler responsibilities in developing a more equitable relationship between settlers and Indigenous peoples. And this is a major goal of my research. I aim to uphold this responsibility by examining the way taken for granted aspects of Canadian culture, and in particular hockey culture, perpetuate and maintain hegemonic narratives of white nationalism, xenophobia, racism, and ongoing settler colonialism. My broad research question is, how did Don Cherry's final rant on Sportsnet on November 9th, 2019, and the popular response to his firing on Twitter illuminate the continuing salience of white supremacy, xenophobia, toxic masculinity, and colonialism in Canadian sports discourse? Don Cherry is especially famous for his long-held position as co-host on Hockey Night in Canada, and Cherry was fired in November for singling out Canadian newcomers who do not wear a poppy and implying that they are showing disrespect to veterans and are consequently less worthy of the privileges of Canadian citizenship. Don Cherry said,
downtown Toronto, forget it, downtown Toronto, nobody wears a poppy, and I'm not going to wait. He says, wait a minute, how about running it for the people that buy them? Now you go to the small cities, and you know those, the rows on rows, you people love, they come here, whatever it is, you love our way of life, you love our milk and honey, at least you could pay a couple of bucks for poppies or something like that. These guys pay for your way of life that you enjoy in Canada. These guys paid the biggest price. Anyhow, I'm going to run.
So hockey is a taken for granted aspect of Canadian national identity, and dominant narratives about hockey maintain hegemonic beliefs about whiteness, masculinity, and citizenship. My presentation today will focus on sharing my preliminary data analysis findings with you. I'm using critical discourse analysis to analyze the Twitter comments replying to these tweets by CBC and Sportsnet when they tweeted on Cherry's dismissal on November 11th in 2019. Critical discourse analysis is an exploratory form of research which can illuminate relations of power, dominance, and social inequality to better understand the way dominant discourses shape society. Critical discourse analysis is well suited for my research as I am interested in the way dominant national narratives about Canadian identity are implicated in creating hierarchies of citizenship. Critical discourse analysis has been used to analyze numerous contemporary texts such as internet memes, social media posts, and social media comments like Twitter replies. An important part of my presentation today is sharing my research method, and in particular my coding process. There's a significant gap in social science literature regarding how researchers code their data, and that's why I felt it important to share today. During my data collection, I collected over 4,000 tweets and uploaded the tweets into a coding software. My coding process is largely influenced by the work of feminist social scientists who emphasize the importance of practicing reflexivity during data collection and data analysis. I started by open coding my data. I looked for emergent codes based on dominant ideas relating to citizenship, racism, xenophobia, masculinity, and Canadian nationalism. The style of coding I'm using involves reading through data multiple times to establish emergent codes and adding them to the margins of the text. So you can see this here. I've collected some tweets into this transcript and used colored codes to flag themes as they emerge in my data, and these are the codes flagged on the side here. Open coding is followed by focused coding, where the researcher organizes the codes and develops links and analytic themes between codes. Today, I'll share some of the focus codes along with examples of tweets. So one of the first focused codes I'm looking at is the code, "What all Canadians are thinking." So one user said, "Dawn was just saying what we were all thinking. Only self-loathing white people are celebrating this." Cherry's dismissal. "This isn't the same Canada my parents immigrated to anymore." Another user said, "The fact that Dawn Cherry has been fired for saying what most Canadians are thinking is absolutely ridiculous." After conducting research on Cherry's public persona, I found that Dawn Cherry often characterizes himself as a regular working class guy who tells it like it is, and who acts as a social enforcer who ostensibly says what all other Canadians are thinking but are too afraid to say. A second focused code I've established in my data is the fear of the loss of freedom of speech. One user said, "And there goes Dawn Cherry. Cancel culture is cancer. Can't even have an opinion. Remember, this is not a free country with freedom of speech. If you don't fall in line with the masses, they'll do anything they can to ruin your life." Another user tweeted, "Dawn stands up for supporting veterans and gets fired for having an opinion. A sad day for free speech in Canada." A question I will explore in relation to this theme is, how does the fear of the loss of freedom of speech reflect anxieties about Canada's changing national identity? Another focus code I've seen and established in my data is Canadian values versus anti-Canadian values. So one user tweeted, "Big deal, it's Cherry's way of speaking. He's not a professional orator. As to he divided us, heck, we're already divided and it won't get better. There are great immigrants that assimilate and others less great that refuse assimilation." Another user said, "Grow a pair. Dawn Cherry made an observation. I agree with him wholeheartedly. The immigrants of today do not respect Canadian culture." So when I'm looking at this code, I'm seeing that these tweets illuminate dominant beliefs about what it means to be a good or real Canadian through assimilation to dominant Canadian values, like pro-militarism. A final focus code that I'm looking at is the combination of snowflake, cancel culture, and people being too easily offended. One user said, "This is why people hate leftist boomers and Gen X. Cancel culture is garbage. PC culture rips people apart more than one old dude saying something bad." Another user tweeted, "Cherry never mentioned color or even implied it. Social justice warriors get on a bandwagon and they can read whatever they want into anything. Goodbye freedom of thought or speech." In my analysis, I will look at tweets like this to answer the questions: how does the pejorative use of the word snowflake connect to ideas of toxic masculinity and weakness? How are snowflakes, or social justice warriors, represented as a threat to Canadian national identity, to Canada's national identity? It's clear that these tweets can be coded in more than one way, and I've identified many tweets with more than one code. These complex ideas and themes work together, and I will weave them together in my analysis based on the findings of my literature review. A theme that has emerged in my research through coding tweets is a consistent pro-military sentiment. Interestingly, even those who condemn the racism in Cherry's rant still espouse a pro-military sentiment. For example, one user said, "This was the perfect day to do it, to fire Cherry, and send a message loud and clear, #lest we forget, #Remembrance Day." This is interesting because although they agree that Cherry's words were problematic, they do not problematize the continued support of the Canadian military. I'm interested to study this apparent contradiction and the taken for granted importance of Canadian military and Canadian national identity. So these are contradictions that I'll continue to work through in my analysis. A major goal of my research is to challenge the normative idea, the myth, that Canada is a welcoming, friendly, peaceful place with citizens who embrace and celebrate diversity. This myth ignores and erases the lived experience of those in Canada who experience systemic and institutionalized oppression like racism and xenophobia. As a white settler, it was important for me to create a research project that questions the dominant ideas, like the myth of the welcoming Canadian nation, because I directly and indirectly benefit from these dominant narratives. I hope this work honors my responsibility as a settler to the Tua Wampum Treaty and my commitment as a feminist dedicated to social justice activism. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation today.
Thank you, Jessica. That was